how's it going everyone? King Blacktooth here. Welcome to this particular video. I want to discuss the operator card and analyse him in depth in this particular video. Now I managed to analyse him in my neutrals video because that's where he belongs, he's a neutral card. But I wasn't able to go as in depth as I would like to, I did mention it in that video, because he's a card with a new ability which you really need to look at the rest of the cards in the entirety of the game to sort of analyse just how good this card could be. So I actually like the change that has happened to the operator. It used to be that he would, when played, pick a random unit from your opponent's deck, and the deck was treated as if it was new, so any card they've drawn out of it didn't count. So it was a new deck, and it would create and play a copy on your side of the board. So any unit, it could be something like a 1 strength Foglet, it could be a 3 strength Wild Hunt Rider, which was rubbish for you, or it could be something really, really powerful like a golden Shani, golden Zoltan, golden Geralt Swordmaster. So, you know, the range was quite huge, and there was no skill involved whatsoever. Everyone was only placing down to either get something really, really cheap like Operator Geralt.
Blind, greedy fool. Always willing, pal.
That's the hope, but yeah, they've got rid of that now. So that was bad RNG in my books. So the operator now is this card. It's a 4 strength silver card and goes on the ranged row. It's neutral for everyone. Choose a non-gold card in your hand, create a copy of it in your hand and your opponent's hand. So on first impressions, a very scary card, because the obvious impression is that you want to copy a card from your hand that's really, really powerful, but then obviously you're giving it to your opponent as well, which is really, really scary. So the obvious choice is that you want to copy something which is going to be really good for you, but really crap for your opponent in a particular game. So that's what we're kind of going to go over. We're going to go over cards which have the potential to be really good for you and really useless for your opponent. So there's also quite a lot of heavy conditions in this particular video. So this card really depends on what deck your opponent is playing, okay? So you have to identify what deck they have, and that's where a bit of skill comes in as well. But like if you're going to copy a card which buffs itself with the amount of dwarves on your side of the board, for the most part that'll be fine, because most decks don't run that. But if they are playing a Scoia'tael deck which will benefit from that, then that is a choice which you don't want to do. So there are conditions, and it's mostly around what deck is the opponent playing, and is this a good card to do for the opponent. So you'll have to do that by ear, which is also a skillful play. If you misidentify their deck and then you give them a card which is really useful for them, then you know it's your fault, and that was a misplay by you, which is skillful, which is nice. So before we move on to what cards are going to be really useful for the operator to copy, there are 2 strategies which seemingly are universally good no matter when you play them. So the first one is the old wait until the last round and your opponent has passed before playing this card. Now it does require you to have at least 2 card advantage, because you need this card and another card in your hand. But if you manage to have those 2 cards and your opponent has passed, then whatever card that you duplicate using this card, your opponent will get but won't ever be able to play. I don't think this is the best version of it. Avallac'h is probably the best version of this particular ability, to give a card to your opponent that is useless and they can't ever play because they've passed on round 3. But, you know, it's a viable option if you manage to get 2 card advantage. But if you got 2 card advantage, you might be able to win if you didn't have this card anyway. So the second strategy using this card is an infinite cycle strategy. You know, it pretty much means you're allowed to play this card forever and ever and ever and ever. But there are some conditions, and it's unlikely to happen. But as we've seen during the Kill the Server stress test, with the amount of people playing, it will happen eventually. So what you need to do is have this in your hand, and your opponent has already played his, so it goes into the opponent's graveyard. And then you use your card Ulderic. Draw 1 random card from the opponent's graveyard and put it into your hand. So if you play him and you get the opponent's operator, you now have, so you place 1 down, choose a non-gold card in your hand, so you choose your other operator, which will get duplicated and 1 to your opponent. So now you've still got 2 operators in your hand and you've got 1 on the board. And then when it's your next turn again, you place another operator, it gets duplicated, so you've still got 2 in your hand and 1 for the opponent. Now if the opponent hasn't played their other operator, he'll now have 2 as well. So now he can do that cheesy strategy. He could play one operator, duplicate his other one, and, you know, I'll get one as well. So now I'll have 3 in my hand. And then you can start to break the game. So I imagine, I've got the feeling, just to stop that sort of thing, this card, the easiest fix for that would be choose a bronze card from your hand and play it. And make a copy, etc. Now, most of the cards that I am talking about in the future that are coming up, quite a lot of them are bronze cards, because although you think, okay, silver cards are good, you know, I really want to copy that silver ability, most of the time you don't want to, because you don't want to give it to your opponent. So that little fix is not too big of an issue, but you know, I've done this bit. I've recorded this in a weird order, so watch the video that's coming up now and see how many silver cards I do put in and how many bronzes and how many that fix would alter and affect. So the first card that is actually quite useful for the operator to duplicate is Biting Frost. Now this one really, there's a condition on what is your deck, you know, how is your deck built, and what deck is your opponent playing. So if you're taking Biting Frost, then for the most part, Biting Frost is okay for you to play. You've either not got any melee units, so it's fine, and you're only using it as control, or you get buffed in Biting Frost, or you're immune in Biting Frost. So if you're running Biting Frost, it's not a problem for you. You need to identify, is it a problem for the opponent? If they're playing monster weather decks, then it's probably not going to be, but it's still an okay card, not worth the copy though. But if they have a lot of melee units, this gives you an extra Biting Frost to just hinder them a little bit more, and it gives them pretty much a dead card, because they can't play their Biting Frost onto their own units because, you know, it's a waste. So if someone gets a duplicate card like this, they've basically got 3 options here. They can play it just to stall, so if there's a Biting Frost already on the board, he could play this just to stall a turn, which is okay, you know, it's still a useless card. They could decide to discard it in some form, like Skellige have a lot of discarding cards, and he would obviously take this as a choice to discard. Or it becomes a dead card and it's in his hand for the rest of the game. Things like Epidemic could go into that sort of scenario where they've got the lowest strength on the board for the entirety of the game, so they could never use it. So Biting Frost, Impenetrable Fog, Torrential Rain, excellent cards to copy if you're playing the right deck for it, which most of the time you would be. Now, Clear Skies is also a card exactly like that, but it's reversed. If you're building a deck where you need to be defensive, you don't want any weather cards on the board, this basically allows you to duplicate a clear weather and give one to your opponent, which is going to be useless, because if your opponent is placing loads of weather cards, that'll be the only reason you would duplicate this. If they're playing Skellige and they don't use any weather cards, then there's no reason to duplicate Clear Skies, so you probably wouldn't. But if they are using weather cards, this gives you another one, and it gives the opponent a dead card. Again, they could use it when there's no weathers in play, just to stall a turn, which is the best thing to do, or they could discard it or whatever. Okay, so again, this is quite decent for defensive style decks. Now, one card which is not going to be great is Aeromancy, and the reason for this is that although it still weathers, it's weathers that you can't control what your opponent is going to do. And for the reason is that you might have loads of rain units which are not immune to rain, but you're placing loads of Biting Frost and Fogs down. Well, this means that your opponent could play a rain on you. So this is not a good weather card to actually copy. But following on from the cards which you can control, anything like Skellige Storm, White Frost, or Marigold's Hailstorm, which are already set in what they do. So again, if you've got Skellige Storm, which creates and plays a fog and rain, most likely you're either immune to the fog and rain, you get buffed in the fog and rain, or you only have melee troops. So if you're running this in order to copy it from your hand, then generally it's okay for the opponent to have this card because it's going to benefit you in some way. Okay, so this is another weather card, and any like this which will work quite well for you to copy. So our next card is Monster Nest, so you have to be playing the monster deck in order to copy this card. Create and play a copy of all units on your side of the battlefield whose descriptions state they are copied by this card. And so far, for monsters, we've only seen Nekkers and Arachas which use this card, but it copies all of them, not just one particular row, which is really nice. So the condition here is what deck is the opponent playing. If it's anything other than monsters, this is a free card to copy for you. If they are playing monsters, you have to analyze a little bit more closely. There are probably different monster archetypes, and not all of them will go for the Swarm deck with the Arachas and the Nekkers, but just be a little bit more careful there. But yeah, if they're not playing monsters, then it's completely free for you, because you will be able to use it and duplicate your Arachas and your Nekkers, and the opponent can't do anything with it. Again, it's going to be a stalling card, because they'll play it and nothing will happen, or it will be a discard bait. Now, it won't ever be a dead card for them, because they can always play it because nothing will happen. It's not going to cause any injury to their side of the board. So this is a great card to copy, in the sense that it's going to be really beneficial for you and not so for your opponent, really actually quite useless for them. Now the question is, the 4 strength of the operator and the silver card slot, is it worth it just to copy this card? I'm not sure. The weathers earlier, that was a big deal, because just having, if your opponent clear skies all your weathers, that's quite devastating, but just having one more could make or break the entire game. If you manage to end the game with a weather card, that's a huge deal, you know. I'm not sure this would turn the tide as much, because you're just going to copy some Nekkers and copy some Arachas, which aren't too much strength. We need to know whether it's just the original 3, like what an ability used to do, because, for balance reasons, obviously. But yeah, it's definitely a good card for copying, but I don't know if it's worth it. I guess the option is there for you, and monsters might have other options, like the weathers are definitely a good option for monsters. So our next card is the Thunderbolt Potion. Choose a non-gold unit on your side of the battlefield and add 4 strength to all copies of it on the same side. So it only affects your side of the board, and the condition here is really, do you have a very heavy muster deck, which is probably the only reason you would take this, in my opinion, and does your opponent? So if you're fighting 2 muster heavy decks, you know, you've got one and he's got one, not a good card to copy. If, however, you've got a muster heavy deck and your opponent hasn't, it's going to be a great card. So going back to monsters, they seem to be quite common at the moment. Using the monster nest, all your Arachas, you could get like 9, 12 of them on the board using the monster nest, and then you could give them a Thunderbolt. And if you give one to your opponent, he may be able to get, you know, 8 strength. If he hasn't got a muster deck, he might have 2 Redanian Knights or something like that. It's not going to be a massive deal. So that's the hope. Make sure it's way more effective for you than it's going to be for your opponent. And this is where identifying your opponent's deck really comes in. It's a lot harder to do here, because it's not as simple as, is the opponent a monster player? No, it's fine. This is, has he got musters? Or failing that, you could still decide not to play if they've got 3 Redanian Knights on their side of the board, or something like that, where they could get potentially 12 strength from it. So, you know, there's a nice bit of skill there, where you've got to correctly identify a deck and when to use this card. So we're on to units now, and the first one is the Clan Dimun Pirate Captain. This is a 1 strength bronze card for Skellige, and it goes on the ranged row. Whenever you discard a card, add 3 strength to this unit, and it's immune to impenetrable fog. So the only reason to take this in a deck is if you're playing the Skellige discarding card archetype deck. Okay, and this card is going to be amazing for that type of deck. He's going to skyrocket in strength from 1 to 4 to 7 to 10 to 13, you know, to 16. He's going to go so high really, really quickly, because you can discard so much. So the condition here is, what deck are the opponent playing? If they're playing a Skellige deck, are they playing the discarding archetype? If they're not, then, you know, this is pretty good card still. But anyone who's not Skellige is going to have a hard time discarding cards. Now, they may have the Last Wish, and there may be a couple of other abilities. I did just go and check Prince Stennis. Just draw 1 card face up and 1 face down, choose 1 to keep, but return the other to your deck. So even this is not a discarding type ability. So anyone who's not Skellige playing the Skellige archetype is going to have a hard time discarding cards. So they may be able to get him up to possibly, you know, 7 strength with the Last Wish, but yours is going to be going to 15 really easily. So, and if he stays on 1 strength for too long, you can use any 1 point of damage to just destroy him. Things like the Clan Brokvar Archer, which does 1 damage to 3 targets, would just take him off the board, and then you don't have to worry about him. So, an amazing card to copy for Skellige. Now, controversial card, the Priestess of Freya. I'm actually saying this is medium to copy. So it's a 1 strength bronze card for Skellige as well, and it goes on the siege row. Choose a bronze card from your graveyard and play it. So it's a medic, but it can only pull out bronzes. Now, it is going to be controversial. Giving a medic to your opponent is scary. Okay, very, very scary. So the condition here is you're playing Skellige, so it's guaranteed that your bronze cards are going to be really, really, really good. They're going to be, buffed in the graveyard, and when they come out, they may get buffs in some cases. So you've got a lot more choice than most other decks, most other players. And your bronze cards are really, really good. So having 1 more medic is a big deal. You are probably going to beat whatever your opponent could medic out, because they can only medic out bronzes. Most players' bronzes are not that good. You might get something which is possibly 8 strength. I'm thinking the monster's Archgriffin, which is the bronze card and removes a weather from a particular row, which is pretty powerful. But there are other cards, Redanian Knights, which are 7 strength, no ability. You've got poor infantry. So you have to weigh that up. As Skellige though, your bronzes are generally going to be the best in the game, I would think, because you're going to get an extra medic, which is so important for you. You could use it to chain medic. You could use it to pull out an axeman or a skirmisher, and they're just so much better for you than many other decks. So it's a controversial one, but I think you could get paid back in dividends with this card if you play it right and really truly identify and analyze your opponent's deck and what kind of bronze cards he has. So I shouldn't really leave it up to you to do the discovery. I should do it here. So here's some of the bronze cards which other decks could have. So Squirtel, 8 strength, Dol Blathanna Marksman, no ability. So you've got to be able to be 8 strength with Skellige, and most of the time you can. You've got things like the Clanter Siege skirmishers, which will pull out at 9, but then if you've buffed them in the graveyard with like Draig, they'll be 11. The deck ability will get them up to maybe 13. So it's not a massive jump, so just be aware that you really are only getting like maybe 4 strength, and if your opponent has something to buff these and you don't, then it's going to be a bigger issue. And monsters have the same sort of thing, 8 strength. Northern Realms have the same sort of thing, 8 strength as well. A Blue Stripes Commando possibly. Choose a bronze unit on your side of the battlefield and play it again, so you might get an extra ability. Like the medic, so you might be able to play, they might get 2 medics, 2 Priestesses of Freya, because that's a bronze unit. So if they've got like maybe 3 of these in the deck, right, they could play the Priestess, play that, pick up the Priestess, play it back down again instantly, because that's what it does, and then pick the second one out, play the Priestess, and so they can get all of these out, which is only going to be 12 strength supposedly, but that's 12 plus 1, which is 13 strength, which is pretty much starting to very much compete with whatever you could pull out of Skellige, so do be careful about these things. So I'm not saying Priestess of Freya is an excellent choice, but it's just a choice to keep in mind that, if you play it towards the end like that, the operator against this, then you can kind of guarantee to have a look at what's in his graveyard and what kind of bronzes he could possibly have. So the next card we've got, I had to stick in just for fun, because this is going to be a fun thing to try and do. Priscilla, 1 strength silver card for Northern Realms only, goes on the siege row. Play 2 random cards from your deck. So it's quite an interesting ability, but if you operate her, then obviously you've got 2 of her and your opponent's got 1, so you can effectively play 4 cards from your deck and your opponent can play 2. Now I wouldn't generally risk it, but if you just want fun, playing 2 random cards is fun. It might have a bit of a whiff of old operator, where you could play a Foglet, or you could play a Wild Hunt Rider, or you could play Geralt and Zoltan. There's opportunities for some big horrible RNG there, but yeah, the operator in this will just give you a bit of fun, really, which is nice. So our next controversial card is Draig, 2 strength silver card for Skellige only, that goes on the siege row. Add 2 strength to all non-gold units in your graveyard. So this is scary, because obviously we don't want to really buff the opponent's graveyard very much, and that's where the worry comes in. However, if you're playing Skellige, then you're going to have a lot of medics, and being able to give them +2 strength to all your non-gold cards in your graveyard is really good. Being able to do it twice is even better. Now, the condition is, what is your opponent playing? If they're playing Skellige, not a good choice because they've got a lot of medics. If they're playing Northern Realms, we'll have to see how prevalent field medics are in a Nekke. Generally not a good choice if you're fighting against Northern Realms at the minute because they've got a lot of medics as well. However, if you're playing against monsters, I think we've only seen one medic for monsters. So, you know, they're not going to be able to medic out many things. So buffing their graveyard is not a big deal. So it's fine to buff their graveyard because maybe they'll only get like +2 strength because they can only medic out one thing. If you're fighting against Squirtel, I don't think they've got access to any medics, maybe apart from the Bloody Baron. But not many people are taking that, I don't think. If you look at the Bloody Baron here, used in 36.26% of Northern Realms decks in the past 30 days. Yeah, I mean, it's used in a couple of decks, but not many, I don't think. So, still, if Squirtel only have the Bloody Baron, it's still only +2 strength for them. But as Skellige, it's worth a lot more to you. So, generally a good card, but you just got to make sure that your opponent is playing certain factions. You have to keep up to date as cards get released on how many medics each faction has to whether it's worth doing this card. So an obvious choice is the Dwarven Mercenary. 2 strength bronze card for Squirtel, goes on the range row. Add 2 strength to this unit for each dwarf unit already on your side of the board. So an obvious choice here, because then you get an extra, if you're building a Dwarven deck, then you've got an extra possibly 8-10 strength or something, because this one gets buffed with all the amount of dwarves you've got on your side of the board. And for your opponent, obviously, unless they're playing Squirtel Dwarven deck the same as you, then it's going to be pretty crap for them because it's only going to stay at 2 strength for the most part. Now, you could copy pretty much any dwarf and place him down, and it would allow any of these that you had to get an extra 2 strength, but it's generally other dwarves have abilities which will be useful for your opponent. So this one's really good because your opponent will find it useless. It will be a 2 strength card for them, but for you it will go up to 8, 10 or however many dwarves that you have on the board at the time, which is really nice. And next card is Elias, which is a 3 strength silver card for Squirtel, also has the agile ability. Whenever a Commando Neophyte appears on your side of the battlefield, add 2 strength to this unit. So by copying it, you're giving them the 3 strength and the ability to sort of get buffed by a Commando Neophytes on their side of the board. So if they're not playing Squirtel, then they're not going to have any Commando Neophytes. So this is a good card to copy because hopefully you place both down and they both kind of get stacked up a lot. We don't know how strong and useful Commando Neophytes are, but we can tell this is going to be a good card to copy anyway, nonetheless. So this card, the Elven Mercenary, is pretty much just a gamble. Okay, there's a little bit of strategy you can do, but it is still gamble. 3 strength bronze card for Squirtel as well, has agile. Play a random special card from your deck. So if you're playing Elven Mercenaries, you're running them in your decks, then most likely you've built a deck where your special cards are fine. You know, you know what special cards you've got, and you've built a deck meaning that they're not going to harm you. Things like Alzor's Thunders, Lacerates, Stemmelford's Tremors, things which you know you can control rather than Scorches and Epidemics and stuff like that, which might hurt you. However, your opponent might not have built that sort of deck. So by gambling it and giving it to your opponent, he will use it at some point, but he could screw over himself, or he could waste a really good weather card early on that he didn't want to. So, you know, it's a gamble. If you're playing monsters, then maybe give it to him, because then he's probably going to play some form of weather card, which, you know, he would probably play anyway. Hopefully you can make him use this before you use your clear weathers, so he's wasting weathers. But for you, hopefully it'll be a lot better. But it is a gamble, because you may give it to the opponent and he may pull out something really, really good, and you don't quite know what special cards the opponent has. So it's a gamble, but it could pay off. You've got to be in sync with what kind of deck the opponent is playing, and you know, it will allow you to, if you've got a decoy somewhere in your deck, it will allow you 2 attempts to get it out, which is, you know, nice as well. So Poor Infantry, this is a 3 strength bronze card for Northern Realms, goes on the melee row. Now its ability is that when you play it, it creates and plays 1 copy of this unit now, so it doesn't create 2, so it's still the same amount of strength, It's 6 strength, but it's only on 2 units now. So mostly this is not a great one. You could say it's poor. Because when your opponent plays it, they're getting the exact amount of strength, the same as you. You're getting 6, they're getting 6. But the thing is, as Northern Realms, you might be able to promote tons of them. You know, so that is generally the only reason why you'd want to pick this one, is because you've already got, like, say, 6 of them on the board. This will give you 8, and when you promote them all, it is worth more to you. But it's not that great of a one. I could say it's a poor choice of card. Yeah. We've got the Queensguard, which is a 3 strength bronze card for Skellige only on the melee row. And this has a unique ability. It really depends on whether you're building your deck to use this type of card. Play all copies of this unit from the graveyard and add 1 strength to Ceres wherever she is. Okay, so the aim of these cards is to get them into your graveyard, muster them out using a medic or something, and then Ceres gets buffed. So by duplicating 1, it's going to be useless for your opponent if he's not playing Skellige. But for you, it's going to mean that more get mustered every time you muster some out, and Ceres is going to go up in strength just a little bit higher as well. So a double pro for you, which is really good. Now, you obviously don't want 1 in your hand, but copying it early and then discarding 1 means you can play this other one and they'll all come out of the graveyard, or you can put them all to the graveyard and medic them out. So there is choice. You don't want them in your hand, but sometimes having them in your hand is fine, because then they're targets for discarding, which is exactly what you want to do with these guys. So yeah, these are good cards to copy, because you're going to get an extra 3 strength whenever you play one. They'll all get mustered out, providing you've got them all in the graveyard. And Ceres will get more strength, and, you know, everything just gets a little bit better when a duplicate one of these, when you've got 4 in your particular deck. So another obvious choice is the Reaver Hunter. This is a 4 strength bronze card for Northern Realms and goes on the ranged row. Has a 2-turn countdown timer. So its ability is add 1 strength to all other copies of this unit, wherever they are. After 2 turns, play a copy of this unit from your deck. So a very slow muster card. Now, obviously, it's a useful target to copy because all your other versions get +1 strength. So it's not just the fact that you're getting another 4 strength, but you will get +1 on all the other 3. So it's effectively another 3. Now, you want to make sure you copy it before you start playing them, because if you copy it quite late on, say, your 3rd one, then it's not going to get the buffs from all the previous ones. But, you know, it's a card which gets stronger and stronger the more duplicates you have in your deck. So a very good card to do. And again, for your opponent who, if not playing Northern Realms and doesn't have these, then it's just going to be a 4 strength card, which is generally quite crap. So it's going to pay dividends for you, where it's not going to pay it for your opponent. So the next one, we've got the Nekker Warrior, which is an odd card. You know, it's a little odd. 4 strength bronze card, and it's for monsters only and goes on the melee row. Choose a bronze unit on your side of the battlefield and create 2 copies of it and add them to your deck. So let's just go over the idea that if you copy this card and you give 1 to your opponent can duplicate some bronzes and put them in his deck. And you can do the same. For the most part, that's useless. What's the point in putting bronze cards into your deck when you can't get them out in many ways? Not much. Now, the main way to get them out is muster. However, you have to have played the cards first. So if I play my Wild Hunt Riders and they all come out of my deck and I duplicate them, I can't play them again because I haven't got any in my hand anymore. However, now that duplicate musters never come out of your hand, they only come out of the deck now, this card is actually advantageous to have duplicate musters. So if I've got 2 Wild Hunt Riders in my hand, I play one and the other one comes out of my deck. Okay, and then I can use this guy and the copied version that I get to duplicate the Wild Hunt Riders, so that I get basically 2 put into the deck and then another 2 put into the deck. And the more of this guy, the more I can get into the deck. And I've still got 1 in my hand ready to pull all of those out of the deck. So a couple of requirements there, really. Your opponent hopefully doesn't have a mustery type of deck, so it's not going to be that useful. It's going to be hard to get some of their bronzes out. Obviously, if they've got a lot of medics, you want to be a little bit careful, especially around Skellige discarding things, because they're going to get a lot of cards into the graveyard. But there is a limit, you know. They can only medic out so many things, but Madman Lugos will get buffed a little bit more, but you know. So just be careful how many medics the opponent has and whether they're playing a muster style deck. And for you, the requirement really is that you've got a duplicate muster in your hand. Then this card works really nice. You place one down, and then you can copy that one while keeping one in your hand. And then you get 2 in your deck, and then you use the copy of this to get another 2 in your deck. And if you've got a third one, another 2 in your deck. And when you do play finally that last muster card, you're going to get another like 4 or 6 come out. So it's going to be super strong. So a very odd card, a lot of requirements on it, but it can make a good combo if you manage it. So another controversial one is Blueboy Lugos, 4 strength silver card for Skellige only and goes on the melee row. Create and play a spectral whale unit on the opponent's side of the battlefield. So this is a really powerful ability. Okay, so you place him down loyally and you create a disloyal whale, which is, we don't quite know the strength because they haven't uploaded the tokens, but during the Russian streams, which is the most recent, it was 2 strength. So that's good to know. We can do some speculation based on that. And what it does is it goes on a row and minuses 1 strength off every non-gold unit on that row permanently. Then the next turn, it goes to a new row and minuses 1 off everything on there. Then it goes to a new row next turn, minuses 1, and so it just keeps going around different rows, minusing 1 permanently off every non-gold unit. So it's really strong. So you'll have access to 2 of these if you copy him, but your opponent will have access to 1. So the condition here is that you know that in your hand you've got a way to deal with the whale as soon as it's played against you. There's some way to wound it for 2 or 4 strength, depending on what it will be. They're the most likely numbers. A way to wound it for that much, so you can remove it as soon as it's played. And then you've still got 2 for the opponent. So this would also work quite well on the self-wounding / buffing Skellige archetype deck. So the whale gets played against you, you wound it, which counts as being wounded in some way, and then you get buffs on other cards, and then it gets destroyed. So it's a controversial card, but I think providing you had some sort of Alzor's Thunder, you could use cards for Skellige like Clanbrofcar Hunter, choose a non-gold unit on the battlefield and remove 3 strength from it. You could use this guy to destroy the whale as soon as it's played against you. And yeah, so you would basically negate the whole effect if you managed to keep a card back that could deal with it as soon as it arrived, and then you get a really powerful ability. So I like this one. It could work quite well. So another interesting card to use is the Redanian Elite, a 4 strength bronze card for Northern Realms. It goes on the siege row. Whenever 3 or more copies of this card are present on the row, add 2 strength to them and convert them to gold. So for your opponent, they'll just get a 4 strength bronze card, providing they're not Northern Realms and have this card. But for you, you will have easier time getting them up to 3 copies of it, so they get promoted. And, you know, it's basically another 6 that you'll place down. It does require a bit of work. They don't muster anymore. Used to be able to place one down, it musters another one, so it was a lot easier to do. But, you know, it's a card which is going to be more effective for you than it's going to be for the opponent. Although, not by much by the looks of things. It's not 2 strength per Redanian Elite, it's just when there's 3 or more on the row, add 2 strength to them, which means they're going to go up to about 6. You've got the Reinforced Trebuchet, a 4 strength bronze card for Northern Realms as well. Goes on the siege row, I'd like to think so. And it has a 2-turn timer. Add 1 strength to all other copies of this unit, wherever they are. Every 2 turns, remove 2 strength from a random unit on your opponent's side of the battlefield. So every 2 turns, it sounds like the timer resets as well, which is nice. So giving this to your opponent, it means it's just going to be a 4 strength bronze card if they're not playing Northern Realms. If they are playing Northern Realms and don't have this, again, it's alright. Obviously, you are giving them the 2-turn timer, which reduces strength on your side of the board by 2 every 2 turns. However, you'll have at least 2 of these, maybe even have more, so you'll be doing 4 damage each time if you place both of them down, and you may have more. And you get +1 strength for each other one, so you've got to, again, copy this very early on, so when you start placing them down, they all get the buffs rather than quite later on. But yeah, you can get these up. If you've got 3 of them and you operate a 4th, that means it's going to be 5, 6, 7. They're all going to be 8 strength each if you manage to get all 4 down. and then obviously they'll do 8 damage every 2 turns, which is also quite crazy. So, you know, it can be pretty good, this one, but you are giving your opponent the ability to -2 from you every 2 turns, which won't be too bad, because you'll have a greater -2 on them. We've got Vess, a 4-strength silver card for Northern Realms again, goes on the melee row. Whenever a gold card is played on your side of the battlefield, play a Blue Stripes Commando unit from your deck. So again, if they're not playing Northern Realms, then they're not going to get the Blue Stripes Commando, so Vess just turns into a 4-strength silver card, which is useless to them, really. So this is really good if you're building a Blue Stripes Commando style deck. So let's move on to what the Blue Stripes Commando unit actually is, that Vess will pull out if you manage to duplicate her, which is actually very useful because Blue Stripes are really quite good. Blue Stripes Commando is a 5-strength bronze card for Northern Realms, goes on the melee row. So if they're not Northern Realms, it's not going to be very useful to them at all. So their ability is add 2 strength to all other copies of this unit wherever they are. So they don't muster, so they are hard to get out, which is where having 2 Vesses actually comes in handy because you'll get most of them out, and their strength seems quite high for their ability. So you play one out and you'll get one that stays on 5 and the other 2 will go to 7 wherever they are, so they do protect each other, which is nice. If you play your second one, then you'll have one that goes up to 9 and the other 2 will stay at 7, and when you play your third one, the other 2 7s will go to 9 and the 9 will stay where it is. So they'll all end up on 9 in the end. And then the choice is that you could copy this instead of Vess. Okay, if you manage to copy this, then you'll have one that stays on 9 and 2 that are 11. So that's quite a lot of strength there. Obviously, it's quite a few cards you've placed. That's 4 cards because they don't muster in any way. But you get a lot of choice. If you've got a lot of Blue Stripes Commandos in your hand, then you can operate to these guys and it's only 5 strength for your opponent. Or if you don't, then you can operate Vess and you get more Blue Stripes Commandos in your hand. So, on the board. So, you know, you've got a lot of choice there for Northern Realms with the Blue Stripes Commandos and Vess, which is really cool. So we've got the Vrihedd Vanguard. This is actually an old piece of artwork, so we don't know what strength it is, but it could still stay at 4. Really, the only important thing is its ability, which is not actually the encourage icon, but create and play 2 Commando Neophytes. So again, if the opponent is not playing Scoia'tael, the Commando Neophytes, they'll gain them, but they won't have any effectiveness, they won't have any combo ability. But for you as a Scoia'tael player, hopefully you've built your deck around the Commando Neophytes. We've got a lot of cards which get buffed when they appear, which can destroy them all and get a severe buff. So, you know, having more Commando Neophytes on the board is a really good thing. And for your opponent, they're going to get them, but they're not going to be able to use them as good as you are. So next we've got the Water Hag, which again is a 4-strength silver card for the monsters only and goes on Siege. And it works very much the same way as the weather cards did at the very beginning of the video. Create and play a Torrential Rain is immune to Torrential Rain. So again, if you as a monster player have loads of units on the Siege row that either get buffed in rain or are immune to rain, then obviously your opponent really can't do anything with this card, it's not going to affect them. Or if you're just using Torrential Rains to control the Siege row and all your units are on melee, your opponent also can't do anything with this card. They get the 4 strength, but if they have a lot of Siege units, like they've built a very Siege orientated deck, they still can't even play this card because it'll just hurt them more than it helps them. So, you know, a pretty decent card that could become a dead card for the opponent. So final stretch, guys, we've got a few cards left. We've got Barclay Els, 5 strength silver card for Scoia'tael only, and goes on the Siege row. Now, this is an obvious choice. Add 1 to all of your non-gold Dwarven cards, wherever they are. So, if your opponent is not playing Scoia'tael, then I don't think there is any Dwarves for anyone else. There might be, but I don't think they get affected. So yeah, if they're not playing Scoia'tael, they won't have any Dwarves, so it just turns into a 5 strength silver for them. But then you get to add 1 strength to all your Dwarves twice. So, a decent card to copy if you so choose. 1 strength isn't a lot, but if you've really got a nice hand of Dwarves, it works really well. So the next one is Savage Bear. This is a strange one. 5 strength bronze card for Skellige only and goes in the melee row. While this unit is on the battlefield, remove 1 strength from all non-gold units that appear for both players. So it is a weird one. The reason you want to have this in your deck as Skellige is if you're either playing the self-harming / buffing archetype. So anything that gets wounded on your side of the board buffs a variety of things. Or you're playing the wound the opponent plus Harold the Cripple archetype as well. So you wound them for 1 and then you can wound them for another 4 using Harold the Cripple. So copying this means that it doesn't matter what side on the board it is. If you give it to the opponent and he plays it, he is still wounding himself, so Harold the Cripple still works. You are still wounding yourself, so your buff still works. So it doesn't matter who really plays this, because it still works. Now, you're not getting a massive amount of advantage over your opponent by duplicating this card, but it is an option. Now, I think there is one negative, which is like, there is a thing to be said about having too many Savage Bears in your hand. Because if you play 1 on the board, then all your stuff that comes onto the board gets wounded by 1, which is the minimum amount to get the buff, which is nice. Anything that comes in on the opponent's side of the board gets wounded by 1, which is the minimum amount, but allows you to still use Harold the Cripple. So having 1 bear is enough. Whereas having 2, 3, or 4 on the board, because your opponent's joining in, means that anything you bring in is going to get wounded by 4, which means a lot of things will get destroyed, and, you know, they'll get buffs on other cards, but it means you don't get to keep the card you're bringing in. And the same thing for your opponent. You know, you're destroying a lot of things as they're coming in, and Harold the Cripple won't be as effective. So I think there's the thing for saying too many bears is not a good thing. You know, 3 is too many for Goldilocks, and just the 1 will do. We've got the Arachas Behemoth. It's another strange one. 6 strength bronze card for the monsters only. It goes on the siege row. Whenever a unit absorbs another unit's strength, create and play an Arachas unit on your side of the battlefield. So it's not an amazing card, I think. 6 strength is nice. By copying it and giving it to your opponent, if they're not playing monsters, I don't think there's any other card that I've seen that can, you know, absorb another unit's strength. I think it's monster specific so far. Tied to the Ekimara or the giant toad. So by giving it to your opponent, you're giving them 6 strength, but that's really it. Whereas you could have 2. If you get them both on the board, then that's 12 strength. And then you use cards like Ekimara and the giant toad, and you'll get 2 Arachas for each interaction. So you benefit, but you're still giving them 6 strength. And I don't think his ability is massively strong that it might be worth doing that anyway. Now, our next card is Nithral, 7 strength silver card for monsters only and goes on the melee row. Its ability: whenever a Wild Hunt unit appears on your side of the battlefield, remove 1 strength from a random unit on your opponent's side of the battlefield. Immune to frost. So by duplicating it, you're giving the opponent 7 strength. If they're not playing monsters, then it's just 7 strength, because they're not going to have any Wild Hunt units at all. Whereas now you've got 2 Nithrals, you place them down, so that's 14 strength. And then if you play your Wild Hunt Riders, you're doing 6 points of damage. You know, you've got Wild Hunt Warriors. If you go back to the combo we did ages ago with the Wild Hunt Riders and the Nekker Warriors, so you could potentially get an extra 6 Wild Hunt Warriors in your deck, but when you play 1, 6 come out, which was a crazy combo, really out of the way. If you've got 2 of these on the board or 1 of these, then that means it's going to do 7 points of damage, and so it's a good card to give your opponent. It is quite high in strength, and he might be able to Commander's Hornet or benefit from that, so you have to be careful. But yeah, so it's definitely an ability which is going to benefit you as a monster player more than your opponent who is not a monster player. If he is a monster player, I wouldn't risk it. The final card I want to discuss, and it's a very, I think it's probably not worth it, but it could work. 8 strength bronze card for monsters only. Agile abilities. It can be placed on any row. Remove weather effects from the row on your side of the battlefield. So it just says your side of the battlefield, which kind of means sounds like you can remove fog from only your side of the battlefield and still be on the opponent's, which is really, really weird. But if you copy it, you are giving the opponent 8 strength and the ability to remove a weather. Now, I think there is an archetype for monsters which don't include weathers. Things that use the Nekkers and things that use the Arachas and stuff. So basically the swarm archetype. And this will be really decent for that, because then you can get rid of weathers. So if you're not using weathers as monsters, because you're using the swarm deck, then this is a good card for you. And by giving it to your opponent, you are giving them 8 strength, but if they're using weathers, then it's not going to work well for them. Okay, so it's a hard one. It's probably not worth it. You might as well actually just copy your Clear Skies. But at a push, it might be worth doing this just so that you get an extra remove weather effect if you didn't draw clear weather when you needed it. And by giving it to your opponent, again, if you're not playing weathers and they are, then it's not going to be useful for them. If you're not playing weathers and they're not playing weathers, then it's just 8 strength. But so I don't really think it's worth it unless you really need that clear weather effect. Okay, so that's it, guys, for the operator analysis. There were quite a few cards, more than I actually expected. Now, not many of them created such massively wild combos. I think the craziest was probably the Nekker Warrior with the ability to have a duplicate muster. And then, creating so many of them that when you played the second one, 6 of them come out all at once, which was crazy. But there was some other really nice abilities. The ability for the operator to duplicate himself infinitely is quite strong. Probably nerfed. But again, how many silvers did we actually see? Because the way they might fix that infinite combo is by making it so he can only pull out bronzes. So I just had a little count through all the cards that I kind of did. And I think there was about 21 bronze cards to about 9 cards. I may not have got it completely right because I did some ad-libbing in the middle. But it was about 21 to 9 bronze to silver. So there were quite a few silvers, but I think if this card just went down to bronzes, it would still be fine. They would still give you a lot of choice, and there are still plenty of cards for each faction, which utilizes this ability quite well. And you get +4 strength on this guy as well, which is nice. So thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video, and take care of yourselves, and I will see you not too long, I'm sure. I'll see you very, very shortly, I'm sure. You're coming around for tea, aren't you? Yes, you are. See you guys.